UFC 287, Pereira versus Adesanya 2, right around the corner. Saturday, April 8th from Miami-Dade Arena in Miami, Florida. They changed the name of the building. We won't get into that story. Classic America in the year 2023. Main card starts at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. As you can see, the lead play-by-play voice of the UFC, John Anik, joining me here today. I want to start with this, buddy. We're fresh off UFC 286 in London. Tremendous card. Your boy had a nice parlay he was excited about. Fiziev and Usman. Clearly, I was on the wrong end of both of those. We're not going to sit here and cry in our milk. That's how it goes. But both were dogs. I mean, the favorites were both around minus 250 there. From your vantage point, what was the bigger surprising result of those two matches?
Well, gosh, that's a great question, and you're bringing it hard off the top. So not Leon Edwards, right? Because I did pick Leon Edwards to win the fight. Retroactively, obviously, I can't pick the fight, but going into that fight, I did believe and do believe historically in the adage that when you become the champion in combat sports, you immediately become 20 to 30% better, right? Even just walking out of that arena. And obviously, like Leon Edwards, you put in the effort and understand maybe what it's going to take to beat Kamaru Usman twice, and he did all of that. But for Justin Gaethje at this stage of his career, to dig deep and have the type of training camp that he had, to add muscle mass, to cut weight in the UFC for the first time. He had never cut weight before in the UFC, right? That's a big deal. He looked bigger, felt like he needed the added size. I thought he fought a great fight against Rafael Fiziev, and to sort of upend Rafael Fiziev at this stage of his career, I think that win is really going to age gracefully. I think Rafael Fiziev is a future UFC champion, and Justin Gaethje, if he was ever going to be an undisputed UFC lightweight champion, he had to win that fight, and he had to win it as an underdog. So, yeah, all hail Justin Gaethje for sure.
You can't hurt him. He took shot after shot. You can't hurt him. It's like there's no damage. His face looked fine at the end of that fight.
Looks like you. Looks like you.
Yeah. All right. I mean, the fact, maybe head up or not, but body down, it's a little bit softer on this end. I wanted to ask you one other thing before we jump into the 287 card. When we did the preview for 286, you talked about in your entire career, all the fighter meetings you go into, there's nobody that's been more intimidating than Roman Dolidze, right? You brought that up. He loses a very, very controversial decision to Marvin Vettori to kick off the main card. You know, there's a lot that can be made of that, but I wanted to know how the fighter meeting went.
Oh, well, you know what? So there were 30 athletes on the card, and because we had met with him last time, he was not one of the 15 athletes that we sat down with. So, yeah, I was celebrating a little bit that I didn't have to have that interaction. But, no, it was a close fight to be sure, and I'm not necessarily going to tell you who I thought won the fight for fear that Dolidze might come after me again. But, no, he's a great dude, and but, yes, very much intimidated by him in that setting, and thankful to have dodged the fighter meeting there at UFC 286.
Good for you. Good. That must have been such a weight of relief off the shoulders that you didn't have to deal with that. All right, so we find out during the weigh-ins that Colby Covington was the backup fighter for the main event in the event something was going to shake down. Nothing shakes down, but you start to realize that when something like that happens, the rumors start to speculate that Covington, could be next in line for the title shot. Now it's come out that he's going to get Leon Edwards sometime later this year. What is that? And we'll do more on that, but what does that do for the co-main here between Masvidal and Burns?
Well, I think it upstages them a little bit, but I'm not sure there's a ton of shine lost off of that fight. I mean, these are two fighters that claim South Florida. Obviously, Jorge Masvidal is the king of Miami, but I do believe, given the history with Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal, the three-piece and a soda backstage altercation back in 2019 or 2018, it lays the foundation for a fight between those two. And I do think it stands to reason that Leon Edwards could have this belt for a long time, and all of these fights that people are pining for right now, to whatever degree, could materialize, right? It's rare that Dana White would guarantee a guy a title fight right after the fight. He usually doesn't do that. He did do that in this case with Colby Covington. And, you know, even though I think in a meritocracy, he maybe isn't the most deserving guy, Colby Covington is one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. And, you know, I understand that he does have a candidacy here. But Gilbert Burns, Jorge Masvidal with a Miami backdrop at UFC 287 is a huge fight. I think it stands to reason that you get Gamebred's best, because if that fight is going to materialize, obviously this is one that he has to have. And it's interesting with Gilbert Burns because he's a decorated jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's fallen in love with his hands, obviously, a lot in the UFC. He's a 5-tool player. He's a big favorite here. I think Gilbert Burns, as good as Masvidal is in terms of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a black belt in his own right, I do think Gilbert Burns, as he tries to make another title run, is going to lean on the Jiu-Jitsu, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him try to make it a ground fight here.
Minus 450 favorite, as you alluded to. Huge favorite against Masvidal, who he's lost 3 straight. Now, you mentioned the 3-piece in the soda. He's one of the most entertaining fighters. People love him. They get a kick out of him. He's got a massive fan base, but he loses this, it's 4 in a row. What does that do for the future? What does that do for the legacy?
So legacy-wise, I thought it was interesting, and I knew we were going to talk a little bit about Gamebred's legacy here today. So when I called a fight for the first time in mixed martial arts, it was April of 2009. And he was on the fight card, and it was his 20th mixed martial arts fight. And unlike someone like Colby Covington, who was 5-0 when he got to the UFC, Jorge Masvidal was 23-7 when he got to the UFC, right? So legacy-wise, this is a guy who has more than 50 professional fights, who was fighting in the streets of Miami with the likes of Kimbo Slice back in the day. 2009, historically, one of the all-time great years in mixed martial arts, what he was able to do. Fastest knockout in UFC history against Ben Askren, winning the BMF belt against Nate Diaz, right? The year of Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, and obviously what he was able to do that year resulted in him getting multiple UFC championship opportunities. You know, not a first ballot UFC Hall of Fame guy per se as far as the modern era is concerned, but one of the all-time fan favorites right now, 2023, one of the 5 biggest superstars in the UFC at present, to be sure. And make no mistake about it, with all the guys who have ties to South Florida, there is but one king of Miami, and it's Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. And I might get the Gamebred tattoo on my neck when I retire. I'm not even kidding. Not even kidding. Not even kidding.
How would the wife feel about that? She's okay with the Gamebred tattoo?
She doesn't want it on the neck, you know, but I have talked to George about this. He has to get his sort of cleaned up a little bit, and maybe I'd go at the same time. Maybe not the neck. We'll see.
I mean, if you're going to be the king of a city, Miami's got to be near the top of the list, obviously. Like, it's one thing. I'm from Allentown, PA. To be the king of Allentown, PA, wouldn't mean much.
Yeah. Don't sell yourself short.
Wouldn't be the same thing. Main event, we get rarely do you get a rematch this fast. Pereira and Adesanya 2. Some could say Pereira and Adesanya 4, considering they met twice in kickboxing. Despite losing the first one, Adesanya minus 155 favorite here. You know, if Pereira does it again, are we done with the rivalry? I mean, have we closed the chapter on these two? Or if Adesanya wins, do you think we're looking at a trilogy, much like we just saw with Edwards and Usman? How do you see this thing going?
See, you're asking me because you believe that even if Adesanya loses again to Alex Pereira, that they're not going to be done.
I mean, it was so close last time. That's the thing. It was so close. Not to knock Pereira. I don't want to take anything away from him, but it was so close. Sometimes you just like seeing these guys run it back. And if you get another close result here, I almost want to see it again.
This series is really something. It's amazing to think that you could have one fighter in combat sports, and granted, we should separate the kickboxing and the mixed martial arts, but you could have one fighter 4-0 on the other, and you'd have a tremendous foundation for a 5th fight. Like, that's a crazy reality, and that might actually be our reality. But no, I think Adesanya deserves the distinction as the favorite. I presented him with that information in Perth last month, and he kind of didn't want to be the betting favorite, but he got a whole lot done, as you know, in that first meeting in the UFC before he got knocked out. I did think it was a little bit of an early stoppage. I thought Adesanya might have been able to actually stay in that fight, even though perhaps some of those visuals suggested otherwise. It's a historically great series, and I'm glad that it has sort of transitioned to the UFC. I do think Alex Pereira will be better. It's certainly a much harder fight before the fight for Alex Pereira, and I'm talking about the weight cut. He is a massive, massive man, and at times for Israel Adesanya, even during the title reign, he's committed 183 pounds, 2 full pounds below the championship limit. So, yeah, I mean, how much time do you have? A lot of fascinating angles. I think both guys will be better, and I think Adesanya should be a favorite, albeit slightly.
Bantamweight division to open up the main card. Raul Rosas Jr. minus 190 favorite over Christian Rodriguez. How big of a threat is he, Rosas that is, to become the youngest champion in UFC history? John Jones was the guy, 23 years of age. You know, what are we talking about here? We're looking at some potential history.
So the calendar, I think, makes it very difficult for any man or woman. I think short of coming into the UFC the way Raul Rosas Jr. has done at 18 years of age. It's just very difficult because promotionally you're trying to build these athletes in the right way. So if you're building them the right way, that flies in the face of giving them a title shot before they're 23 years of age and 8 months. Now, Raul Rosas Jr. was born October 8th, 2004. So
look at you.
It does. No, we chased the fighter card before the show. So if it does, I don't know what you were doing in October of 2004. I was probably thinking the Red Sox were about to break my heart again. But
I was drinking in San Diego. I can tell you exactly when I was drinking in San Diego, and they were about to break your heart, but they didn't. That's the breakthrough, isn't it?
No, they did not. Yeah, that is the breakthrough. Absolutely. So Raul Rosas Jr. absolutely could do it. I think he would have to avoid a loss probably to break John Jones's record. And there are other guys like Mohamed Mokaev, who's a flyweight, who's already going to be probably top 10 this week and is 22 years of age. So there's other guys who actually might be able to position themselves for a record. Now, I don't know to what degree Raul Rosas Jr. has prioritize that record, right? Like some guys prioritize retiring undefeated or being the youngest UFC champion. Every fighter, Macy Barber and others who have prioritized breaking John Jones's record have not been able to do so. And even when you look at UFC 287 and Christian Rodriguez, next man up for Raul Rosas Jr., there's no easy outs in this division for him. So it's very exciting though. And he's, we don't necessarily swear here, but he's really, really good, Joseph. I mean, he is really, really good. And age really is just a number. I mean, he seems to have a wisdom, he's translating, interpreting for his parents in English in our fighter meeting because his parents were in the fighter meeting with us. I mean, he seems to have an intellectualism and a wisdom that belies his years and a maturity for sure. He's thick. I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I think he's got a real shot, but C-Rod's up, obviously in a few weeks. So we'll see.
Every time I ask you this question, I end up getting a great answer, not just in the moment, but then when we go on to watch the fights, you knock it out of the park. But anything else on the card that we haven't talked about, something that if we're going to turn it on and watch the prelims or anything like that, that we should be paying particular attention to?
So I just have to tell you guys, Miami is a very exciting thing. 20 years it's been, right? And so I do think that kind of will make it a more festive environment. I just came off of a London show that some people were suggesting was maybe the 4th or 5th loudest London crowd of all time, which almost is a criticism in a lot of respects. I just think it was the biggest gate in the history of the O2, maybe attracted a different clientele because of the ticket price, who knows? But Santiago Ponzinibbio is local, right? He's Argentinian, spent a lot of his time in Brazil. He trains and lives in South Florida and has for some time. He's one of our Spanish commentators. He had a fight with Robbie Lawler go away. He deserves this showcase. He deserves to fight in South Florida against someone like Kevin Holland, who is going to be talking to him the whole time. They're two elite welterweights, and I'm just really happy for the Argentine dagger. I liked his old nickname before, Genchiboa. But I'm very happy for Santiago Ponzinibbio to get the South Florida showcase, to have a big fight like this against Kevin Holland, because he's a fighter's fighter. He has a crowd-pleasing style. On any given Saturday night, I do think he's competitive with any welterweight in the world. And, he's probably going to retire without getting a championship opportunity. So I'm excited for him to be able to walk out into a festive atmosphere. And I don't know if it'll be like a Miami Heat type whiteout in Miami, but it's going to be pretty goddamn festive, Joe.
20 years ago, the last time the UFC was in Miami, you get the debut of Rich Ace Franklin, right? Wasn't he a math teacher? The math teacher who comes over to UFC.
Yeah.
Matt Hughes, Sean Shirk, Pete Spratt, Ruthless Robbie Lawler. Like, that was no joke of a card. You go back 20 years, those are all names people remember, people love.
And my broadcast partner, Joe Rogan, was in the building all the way back then, which is just
Did he
remarkable.
have the hair back then?
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Maybe he had a little beard. I think he should bring the beard back. He had the black beard going for a while. But no, I mean, as you know, we've been in Jacksonville and Tampa and Hollywood and Sunrise and all these different locations in South Florida. And for a while, it was just fight nights in Orlando, never pay-per-views. And then we sort of checked that box, did a couple of pay-per-views in Jacksonville. But with respect to Central Florida and other parts of the Sunshine State in which I reside, Miami-Dade effing County, Miami-Dade Arena, UFC 287. It's just different. So 50 minutes from my front door, and we're very excited.
Good for you. I mean, between Perth, Las Vegas, which is like a puddle jumper for you, London, now you actually get to drive to the arena. Like, I know you'll stay down there for the week, but that's got to be, like, for you, that's just kick the feet up and enjoy the week. Try to build on that already impeccable tan you sport these days. It's got to be great for you. Like, there's no better place to go.
It's very exciting to be able to drive to the show. You know, it affects the prep a little bit. We have no airline time to do my fighter card. So we have to make a little bit of a pivot when it comes to the preparation. But no, I'm very excited. And we'll drive down probably Thursday morning right before the fighter meetings and hit the ground running, my man.
No Dolidze, so you should be fine in those meetings.
Avoid him. Yeah.
Avoid him at all costs. Great stuff as always. Lead play-by-play commentator for the UFC, John Anik. I'm Joe Fortenbaugh. UFC 287 right around the corner as the company just keeps pumping out monster cards. 287 is going to take place Saturday, April 8th. Main card, 10 p.m. Eastern, ESPN Plus pay-per-view. It's in Miami. Keep it locked with oddshark.com. We're going to be rolling out a lot of picks, previews, all that good stuff. And with March Madness still taking place, we'll have all your championship stuff as well. Best of luck on all the action, everybody.